All right, welcome everybody to our monthly webinar. Myself and Mark are SAVI Coaching. We're here in Phoenix, Arizona, where we just finished up actually presenting on this topic live in our Final Four workshop. We had a bunch of dedicated coaches in there learning for 3 hours yesterday, and we got to go through over our 3 hours live not even everything that we had prepared on how to teach 0.5 basketball, teach players to shoot it, drive it, move it better. And so today, what we're going to do is we're going to share with you the lenses through which we would encourage you to view player development in order to develop players with higher basketball IQ. So welcome to everybody that is joining us live on YouTube. Welcome to everyone that is joining us live on our Twitter Spaces. We'll be keeping this Twitter Space live for the beginning of this presentation. But if you want to stay on for our full hour on my Twitter Space friends, I'll be dropping the link to the YouTube free live webinar, and you can switch over to that if you want to get the rest of it. I was sharing this yesterday with the coaches that joined us for our SAVI coaching workshop live. Is here at SAVI, we're on a mission to revolutionize the way the game is taught and played. And I've had the opportunity to be traveling the world teaching basketball for the better part of 2 decades. And as I've attended hundreds and hundreds of coaching clinics, as I've gotten the honor to speak at tens of coaching clinics, of all the coaches I've ever heard present, I've learned the most from Mark. And the first time I heard Mark present, I just got absolute gold. And I realized that he and I were just aligned on how we want to move coaching forward. And that's what caused us to join forces here under the banner of SAVI Coaching. And so that's why we are doing what we're doing. It's why we're doing this webinar, in order to help coaches have 4 new lenses through which to view player development. And that's what we're going to share with you today, is the lenses that we think are required in order to enable players to play conceptual basketball, have higher basketball IQ, and make quicker reads and decisions on the floor. So Mark and I are really excited to share with you today, especially coming out of what we got to share yesterday. Anything to add to that, Mark?
Yeah. First, thanks, man. Appreciate the compliments, and I would echo the same thing about you. Just in our conversations, I always learn hearing you present, and yesterday was a great example of that. I have found the most rewarding and impactful way that I have been able to serve coaches and have been served by other coaches is uncovering blind spots. And I find that what we're presenting on now can be a blind spot for coaches, right? They may lack a systematic approach to player development. And I find, we call it shoot it, drive it, or move it, playing 0.5 basketball. I find this is a way that has really serves coaches well, but also not only does it develop their players, it also adds a completely different dimension to their offense, kind of an underlying theme of the offense. So, what you said is changing the way we view player development by looking at it through a different lens. That's been the most fun part of serving coaches for me. And I think we have a lot of good content to share today.
All right, I'm excited to dive in. First off, a couple shout outs to some of our viewers on live. I hope I say your name right. We've got Pavle, and he said, hello from Serbia, the land of Nikola Jokic. You're doing an amazing job. Keep it up. Ray from Daytona Beach, hello. If you're joining us live, please do drop into the chat box where you're dialing in from. We'll give you a couple of shout outs. It really is amazing the power of the internet, that we can be talking basketball and sharing the game with coaches from all over the world. So let's go ahead and dive into SAVI. So as everyone probably is aware, SAVI means to have deep knowledge of something. And so SAVI coaching is we want to develop and share deep knowledge of how to coach the game of basketball. And in this approach, I want to share a story about Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game, because one of the things that can cloud a lens for a coach, one of the things that can cause us to have blind spots, like Mark referenced, is if we get caught up playing the wrong game. And too often, coaches end up playing status games instead of long-term games. And a status game is where we care more about looking like a good coach than actually being a transformative coach. And here's an example of this. We all know Wilt Chamberlain and his 100-point game, setting the record for most points ever scored in an NBA game. Everyone knows that. But what people don't know, because there wasn't actually film of the game, is that there was something very unique about the game where Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points. It was actually the first NBA game where he shot free throws underhand. So Wilt Chamberlain was historically a terrible free throw shooter, sub 50%, was absolutely dominant, so dominant that opposing teams would make sure that they had multiple big bodies to throw at him because the only way to stop him was to foul him. It was the original hack Shack. It was hack a Wilt. And that was how they guarded him. And Wilt actually had a coach early in his career that said, if you could learn to make free throws, your team would never lose another game. He was that dominant and changed the rules of the game. Well, Rick Barry was a teammate of Wilt Chamberlain's, and he was very frustrated with Wilt's inability to shoot free throws. And you probably know that Rick Barry was over a 90% free throw shooter and shot free throws underhand. In secret, he taught Wilt Chamberlain how to shoot free throws underhand. And in his 100-point game, Wilt Chamberlain rolled it out to the tune of going 28 for 32 from the free throw line. His best free throw shooting game ever, dominant. It's what allowed him to set the record. The very next game, he continued to shoot underhand, scoring over 70 points. I believe it was 72 points. You can check me on Wikipedia. And if not, just edit Wikipedia and make what I'm saying correct. To the tune of 72 points, shooting over 85% from the free throw line. And then after those 2 games of utter dominance and shooting the best he'd ever shot from the free throw line, Wilt stopped shooting underhand. And when he was asked about it, he actually wrote about this in his memoir. He said that he knew he shot free throws better underhand, but he never went back to it because he was afraid of looking like a sissy. He was playing status games. He cared more about how he appeared to his peers, to the fans, to opponents, than what actually gave him the best chance of being successful. I would urge coaches, your biggest blind spot tends to be in your fears. That thing that you're afraid of tends to mask your blind spots. And we hope to offer up 4 lenses. These are the SAVI lenses today that can help expose your blind spots, help you to stop playing status games. And status games usually end up in you doing the same thing that everyone else is doing. Because if you're doing what everybody else is doing, obviously you are of equal status to them. You are not less than them. Whereas any trailblazer, anyone that is a trend setter, anyone that's doing anything great is doing something different than what everybody else is doing. And that's savvy. If you do what everyone else does, you'll get what everyone else gets. And so we want to offer up 4 lenses that will allow you to see more clearly, expose blind spots, and then teach your players how to play 0.5 basketball a little bit better. Mark, what are some common blind spots that you have seen in yourself, in me, in other coaches that we should be aware of?
It's actually something I'm going to dive into, but in the next segment. But I would say embracing the messiness or the adversity of the game. So I'm going to get more into that, but I would say that is the number one way. Is I think the human brain is designed to find the path of least resistance. So the blind spot would be staying away from things that make you uncomfortable and not leaning into those.
That's good. All right, before I go into our first lens of player development, and we apply these 4 lenses to every aspect of coaching today and over the next month as we take our SAVI Grow members or anyone that joins our player development cohort, we're going to apply these lenses to player development, specifically how to develop players that shoot it, drive it, move it faster. But these are lenses we apply to every aspect of coaching. It's the lenses through which we see the game as savvy coaching, and it's the lenses that we want to train coaches that choose to grow with us in the game. So before I do, welcome also, we got some Canada here. Welcome from Canada. Elite 8 basketball. Oh, we got some Regina, Sask, Canada. Jeff, hello from Iowa. Jason from Pittsburgh, hello. Jackie from Idaho, hello. Okay, we got some Ontario, Canada here. Okay, let's rock. This is very exciting. Very quickly, The problem with Wilt Chamberlain and the blind spot for coaches is focusing on the fruit and not the root. This is an emblem, it's an icon that we embrace at Savvy. It's on a lot of our gear. You'll see it on our website. Is if you're playing status games, you're focused on the fruit. The fruit is the win. The fruit is looking like a good player. The fruit is, what Wilt Chamberlain was focused on, which is the fear of looking bad. When you focus on the fruit, the tree withers and dies. You will not have long-term or sustained success. Whereas when you focus on the root and become deeply rooted in a firm identity, well, that's when you can have long-term and sustained success. And if you think about roots, roots grow in the dark, deep down in the soil where no one's seen them. And you want roots that are growing so deep in your own player development and your belief in your systems and strategies that you can't be easily shaken when the inevitable storms come. Wilt Chamberlain had two great successful games. The storm came of some pushback, but he didn't have deep enough roots to continue on his journey. And so we want to help deeply root you through these four lenses. Now, let me give you the first one. You'll see all four listed here. Our lenses are an acronym with SAVI. Our four lenses are simplicity, adversity, victory, and identity. And what we want to do with these lenses is help you as a coach have a small change in what you see, because a small change in what you see can lead to a big change in what you do. And a small change in what your players see can lead to a big change in what your players do. So the simplicity lens is this. What can you eliminate that would distract your players from seeing the most important things? So when you can direct your players' eyes to this one visual cue, they're going to make quicker decisions. When your players' eyes or their awareness or their focus is overwhelmed by too much data or too much information, their decisions are going to be slower. With the intent of playing 0.5 basketball, the shortest route to quicker decision making is in the elimination of things that they're supposed to see. And as we go through in our cohort over the next month and teach you how to have players that shoot it better, drive it better, and move it better, what you'll see is the ruthless elimination of distraction. And so when you think about this, and I'll actually ask you coaches to drop this into the chat box. When you think about player habits and player development, what are your pet peeves? What are the things that frustrate you the most that your players do? The things that you don't want them to do, what are they? Drop them into the chat box. As you're dropping these things in the chat box, I'll list some that coaches shared from our coach workshop yesterday. There were things listed in our coach workshop like dribbling too much was a pet peeve. Not sprinting in transition was a pet peeve. Dribbling to the corner was a pet peeve. Being weak with the basketball is a pet peeve. Not communicating was a pet peeve. Go ahead and list a couple of your pet peeves in the chat box now. As you're listing them, Mark, let me ask you quickly here. What would you say as a coach is one of your biggest frustrations or pet peeves that your players did?
Oh, good question. That actually, I would echo one that we heard yesterday, and negative mistake responses, because we wanted our gym to be an environment where mistakes were okay and players could take risk and have the courage to try to make a play to expand their game. So part of what we always had to coach against is maintaining positive body language. How do we respond to mistakes to where those remained encouraged and players had the psychological safety to kind of go outside the box, like you said, basically get away from the status games.
That's good. Some that are coming into the chat box here are casual running in transition, not erasing or boxing out. Underestimating the opponent was one that was thrown in as well. So all of these pet peeves are great. Now here is the simplicity razor. The longer your list of pet peeves or the longer your list of things to coach and develop, the less movement you'll see on that thing. And I'll share a quick story before I throw it to Mark for our next one. I shared this yesterday in our coach workshop. I had the opportunity to go watch a Team USA basketball practice, their development team, a number of years ago, where Coach Popovich was coaching them. And they started out with just a very simple 5-on-0 weave, 3-on-2 transition back. And Pop just said, hey, no travels, no missed layups, no missed passes. The ball doesn't touch the floor on the way down, go. And it was an absolute mess. There are players like Aaron Gordon and Julius Randle and D'Angelo Russell that were missing passes, traveling. There weren't 5 players getting on the floor. They didn't know who was getting back on defense. It was an absolute mess. There were passing errors, there were footwork errors, there were finishing errors, there were communication errors, there were effort errors, there were focus errors. The errors were numerous. And I was watching on the sideline and I was just listing all of the errors. I'm like, why is this great coach not correcting these errors? And it went on for 2, 3, 4 minutes. And I started to get uncomfortable and frustrated that these high level players couldn't execute this seemingly simple skill. And I was thinking, man, I thought Coach Popovich was a better coach than this. Why is he, well, can't he see what's wrong? Why is he not fixing what's wrong? And it went on 5 minutes, 6 minutes. And I started to think, maybe he's not that good of a coach. Maybe he's just had Tim Duncan his whole career. I was like, I could go out and I could go and coach 20 different things right now. And I was feeling a lot of pride that I knew I could go and coach all the things that I saw. Then after 8 or 10 minutes, much longer than I would have been comfortable allowing the mess to take place, Popovich walks out in the middle of the floor. D'Angelo Russell had the ball at that point. He looks him in the eye. He said, "Are you a leader?" And D'Angelo Russell kind of looks around like who, me? And Pop's like, "Yeah, you. Are you a leader?" And D'Angelo Russell said, "Yeah, I'm a leader." And he went down the line, 3 or 4 players. Aaron Gordon, are you a leader? Julius Randle, are you a leader? And everyone said, "Yeah, I'm a leader." He just looked at them all and he said, I thought this was important to you. And then he went and sat back down. And they went back to work. And everything changed, right? Their footwork improved, their passing accuracy improved, their communication improved, their effort improved, their finishing. Every skill improved when he identified one thing to focus on instead of correcting everything. And that's the simplicity lens. That's the simplicity razor, is identifying what's the one thing that will make unbelievable impact across everything. That's what a savvy coach does, is they eliminate the coaching of everything. This is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. It's in Proverbs. It says, where there is no vision, the people perish. And vision and clarity lie in simplicity. When you coach everything, you end up coaching nothing. And so, as you think about your player development, you think about this lens of how we're going to develop a player. If you try to give a player every tool, you end up giving them nothing. But if you can identify the one tool that a player or your team needs, and you focus on that to the exclusion of all else, that's when you'll really develop. Okay, that's it for me. Mark, let me flip over to adversity for you. You just tell me when you
Yeah.
want me to click through.
You're good there. So earlier you mentioned blind spots, and I immediately just thought about the adversity piece of the chaos of the game, or just the chaos of being a head coach. I think most coaches try to avoid the messiness of running a program or player development or team practices. Uh, could have said blind spots like zone offense, special situations, mentoring their coaching staff, developing leaders, rebounding. But I think it's all very related to um, the human brain is wired to take the easy way. And sometimes the easy way is avoidance. Okay. So on our next slide, we have a pencil here where I think most coaches will default, whether it's team practice, team meetings, individual skill sessions, where we unintentionally design them to look sharp. Uh, what is what would be a good practice where we put these drills on paper and in my head my team just looks really really good, and we forget that the game is going to be messy, chaotic, and most of the game is going to be unscripted. So we have to prepare our players to play in what we would call the jungle. right? Um, so we believe in context of skill development that technique alone is insufficient. So, skill for us would be technique plus game context. And that's what the pencil on the right would illustrate is we may not look very sharp, but the reps that we're getting are going to lead to transfer to the game. So maybe less reps, but every rep is going to be more and more valuable. So Tyler, if you go ahead a couple slides, what we believe is that skill is knowing what to do, when to do it, and being able to do it. And that is being able to make reads and decisions on the fly using your individual skill. So, can we create an environment where players are applying the skills that we've given them? We're equipping them with the skill of adaptability. So, what we will do in our cohort is show you how to create as many reads and decisions. And the best way to do this is to have a lens of plus one. So anytime you add a defender, that would be the plus one, you're going to create a read for your offense. And there's some simple ways to do this. I think this is another blind spot of coaches is how to take my on-air technique drills and create a situation where we can get a little bit more value out of that by adding a read or decision. As a savvy coach, we want to lean into adversity, whether those are hard conversations, um, uh, being proactive with maybe conversations like playing time, but also can we embrace a messy environment in practice, knowing that it's going to lead to the game. So, over the next 4 weeks, we will show you how to create some adversity in your practice. And the victory for us in these 4 weeks is to change the way in which you view player development. So, Tyler, if you go to the next slide for us, bring us to victory. We
Actually, Mark,
talked about,
before you go into victory, can I give one concrete example that you actually shared yesterday with everybody?
yes,
So here's a very concrete example. One pet peeve that's very common for coaches, and maybe for you, is missed layups. Okay, I'm probably getting some amens in the back right now, like, oh, we missed so many bunnies, we missed so many chippies, we missed so many layups, right? And then how most coaches practice making more layups is with no defense. Well, the reason your players are missing layups in games isn't because they can't make wide open layups. It's because they can't make layups against defense. So we do Mike and we let's just work on two line layups, right? And let's work on playing off of 2 feet with no defense, and then it doesn't transfer, and your pet peeve remains the same, right? So like the reason we asked about the pet peeves earlier is like, okay, let's simplify it and identify, okay, here's the one thing. But now once we simplify our lens through our greatest pet peeve, so we spend the majority of our time on it, now let's address this pet peeve in a more savvy way. And the first way to do that is to add more adversity. So the goal isn't to get the clean pencil. The goal isn't to get the perfect reps in practice with no adversity. The goal is to add game-like adversity to practice. That's is how it'll actually transfer to games. So an example of that would be one that Mark brought up yesterday. We were in our gym a couple of days ago, and we were working on finishing off of stride stops, getting a foot in the smile or the restricted area. And all we did was we gamified it. We plus one to defender. We said, okay, defense must stay in the smile. Offense must get a foot in the smile in order to score. But we added this constraint, and you can plus one with a defender, or you can plus one with a constraint or an added load. And so we plus one this load offense. You must get a foot in the smile, and you cannot shoot until you get the defender in the air. We call that an arrow. And so the result was a lot of adversity, a lot of messiness, a lot of missed layups, a lot of travels, a lot of off balance finishes because they had no other options. But another result was they made more fakes than normal. They used more pivots than normal. They initiated more contact than normal. They had more patience than normal. And that will develop more made layups in games more so than shooting at a layup that you would never shoot in a game. It's why I hate two-line layups as a warm-up. It's because you're practicing a shot that you might get 2 or 3 times a game. A wide open, running 1 foot, 45-degree angle layup with a little bit of flair to it. right? So that would be like a very specific example of how we at Savvy would plus one some adversity into a very, very common thing that coaches want, which is make more layups.
Yeah, really, really good. In one way, one thing that came up yesterday too, you mentioned this, and I was guilty of it too as a head coach early in my career. Is um, we can't play 5-on-5 yet because we don't have our whole system in place, or we play a game in practice and it doesn't go well, so then we avoid playing that game in practice. Like, oh, we can't do that. We look that was so bad yesterday, but that feedback should actually tell you that you should do that drill or play that game even more, right? That should almost be an everyday staple until your players learn to adapt to that environment. So yeah, really, really good share there.
Yeah, and let me encourage everyone on
So
live
let's go
here.
to Victor now.
Oh, sorry, real quick, Mark. We have some questions coming in the chat that I think we kind of you're okay if we address them as they come because they're on this topic.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, let's do that.
cool. I'll ask this one of you and encourage everyone on live. This is a webinar. This is not just a presentation. So please ask your questions. We want to serve you. George asks this, and I'm interested in your answer to this one, Mark. Would adding other forms of pressure work on missed layups as well? Like you have to make a certain amount of layups in a certain amount of seconds instead of adding defense. George, thank you for that question. And let me encourage everyone to please fill the chat box with questions.
I would say short answer, yes. You're applying some kind of external pressure, right? Where you're getting players maybe to do something at speed. But I think I would encourage you to still add defense because that's the way the game is going to be played anyway. We're going to have to learn how to play off of 2 feet, how to take contact, how to adjust our finish, because just like no shot is the same in the game, no finish will be the same in the game. So yes, you're applying some kind of external pressure, but I think that might be the very first step to it. And if you're using that maybe as a warm up or you don't want contact, I could get on board with that, but I would still challenge to go +1 with a defender or a constraint like Tyler shared with us.
Yeah, and I'll give another common example, which is okay and better than nothing, but not as valuable as defense. Ball handling, where coach, trainer, teammate holds up a number for the ball handler to call out verbally. Yeah, that's some +1. That's some form of a load, but it doesn't transfer as much as imitating the game. And I think too often we as coaches try to game the game when the game is the game, right? Like a common pet peeve for coaches is players that are cheating the drill, right? And if players can cheat your drill, then it's not enough like the game, right? I mean, Mark made a great point yesterday, where there's a game, a 2-on-2 dominoes game that he plays, where the defense on each pass has to go and touch a hash mark, and he's like, well, inevitably the defense is going to cheat and not quite touch the line, so just have them touch the further hash mark or all the way down to the block, right? So us trying to game the game would be like, okay, no, you've got to touch the line, stop cheating, stop cheating. Whereas just playing the game would be to make the constraint a little bit heavier, +1 the constraint. And so often, like, one term that we use is bones over cones. Okay, I don't have anything against cones, right? I mean, I've used cones, but the idea is that, like, why would we remove the bones? Why remove the defender when we have the people in the gym and we can shorten the lines and teach both sides of the basketball? And the other amazing benefit of using defense and +1ing defense is then you're teaching both sides of the basketball at all times. You get to teach the offense and the defense at the same time. And I think we may have lost Mark there. So let me go to a couple more questions here. Okay, Mark's back. Let me take one more question here, Mark, before we move on. Are you back with me, Mark?
I'm back.
Oh, sweet. Okay, we got another question here. Any drills or ideas to work on ball handling under pressure? Stationary ball handling drills are boring to your kids. Okay, I'm going to throw that one to you, Mark, but I'll say this statement first. Drills that are boring to your kids are probably bad drills. That's just a great indication, right? I mean, like I grew up being coached in such a way, it's like, I know this is boring, but you have to do it. It's going to make you better. And at Savvy, one thing we believe is like, okay, if a drill is boring, then that's probably an indication that you shouldn't be doing it. Because guess what's not boring? Playing the game of basketball. And so the more boring a drill is, well, the more it's probably removed from the game of basketball and probably less valuable to you. So as Mark's coming back on here, I'll give you an answer for drills for ball handling. This is the best ball handling drill that I know. 1v2 full court. And this would actually be a benchmark for me. Like someone couldn't be what we call a racker or what traditional teams would call a point guard. Someone couldn't be a point guard for us or for me until they can actually go one versus two, full court, all pressure, trapping defense, and get 2 feet in the paint at the other end of the court. If you can't do that, you can't be a primary ball handler for us. And so I would just do that over and over and over again. That would be step one. That's being able to dribble against pressure. And anybody that's been in our Savvy community for any amount of time will probably be aware of this. We define dribbling and ball handling differently. Dribbling is the ability to be stationary and not lose the basketball alone without defense. That's dribbling. Those are dribbling drills. And they have some value. You develop a feel for the ball. You understand that the floor is flat and the ball is round and it's going to come right back up into your hand. And you learn to manipulate the ball a little bit better. Ball handling is actually what we want. We don't want good dribblers. Ball handling is the ability to get to where you want to go anywhere on the floor against an adversary. And those are actually two pretty different skill sets. And the skill set of ball handling is perception of the defense. It's the use of cleverness. It's ball protection with your body. It's learning how to use all four levels of ball handling, which is how to go north, how to change your pace going north, how to actually go east, west, and south, how to actually use cleverness and creativity. So that 1 versus 2 drill works on all of those things. All right, I've got okay, we got one more question here, Mark.
Okay.
What's your view on drills versus small-sided games? Since in drills, oh, you got me?
Yeah. I'm sorry. So is there
Okay.
more to that question or
Oh,
just drills?
it's a long one. Sorry about. What's your view on
Yeah,
drills
but
versus small-sided games? Since in drills, you're only teaching a skill in a non-game environment, but in small-sided games, you can still incorporate some real game scenarios. So that's how he's defining drills versus small-sided games.
okay. Um, Great question. And I love that this one was brought up because I think as basketball coaches, we refer to everything as a drill almost, right? Unless it's called a small sided game. There's a big difference between drills and games. Drills is something that was derived from the military where we're telling people exactly what to do. And I think there's a place for drills if we're teaching. So I would categorize what we did in practice into three buckets. We got teach, train, and compete. When we are teaching something, somebody is learning a new skill, we might require a drill for that. Once we've taught them a skill, we can move to training or competing as quickly as possible. In fact, I would say we could even try to start at training. So, one thing we did with the SAVI Academy is we were teaching our team burn cuts. And what we did immediately is we just added guided defense. And this was their first introduction to burn cuts. But what we did is we turned a drill into a game by having the defense either step up or step back and provide a read. That was our +1 for the offensive player to try to show them opportunities to burn cut. They struggled with that. So we rewound, we backed it up and simplified with a drill. And we told them exactly what we wanted them to do. We used this example yesterday. We've all tied our shoes for years and years and years. And at some point, you max out at tying your shoe, meaning we're no better at it today than we were 10 or 15 years ago, that's what drills do, right? They look clean, they look really sharp, but there's no real value there. So I would say do as little drills as possible and try to gamify all of your drills to where we're either training, where maybe we're using guided defense, or we're actually competing. So in terms of small sided games, I love small sided games, more touches, more space, more decision, more opportunity for players. And what you're focused on is the application of the skills you might use or teach in a drill. And that's what we mean by adding game context. We can't add game context in drills because we are telling players exactly what to do. We remove all reads and decisions, but never in the game are you going to be able to predetermine what you want to do and have no adversity as far as a defender uh, trying to stop you from what you're predetermining that you want to do.
Yeah, and Mark, as we transition into the V and victory, we've got some more questions we'll get to in the end. We were
Okay.
reminded yesterday in working with coaches out here at the Final Four how uncomfortable and new and foreign this approach, the savvy approach to coaching is for coaches because it's not how we were coached. And, because Mark and I live in this space, it feels, we assume that it's obvious, but most coaches, when we share these lenses and share these ideas, are like, okay, that makes sense. How do I do it? And that's what we're doing in our cohort is like we're going to take our coaches through over the course of 4 weeks. How do you do it? Simplicity. Narrowed in on how do we make quicker and better shoot it, drive it, and move it decisions. And how do we incorporate technique along with the read? There's no way that we can do that in 1 hour today. What we're sharing with you in 1 hour today is what we think is the most important stuff, which is the new lens to see the game, because a small change in what you see can lead to a big change in what you do. Just this awareness that we're hoping to bring to all of our coaches that are on live and recorded will change what you do over time. And we feel like we're serving coaches in that way and serving the basketball community. If you want to learn to change faster, if you want to apply it right away, please join us for the next month. Join our Grow membership, and you'll get to spend an hour with us live weekly as we take you through it. You'll get all of our resources, all of our drills and small sided games and the drill book and all the other courses. Or just join us for 1 month in a cohort. You can head to savvycoach.com and you can join our Grow membership, or you can pick up our cohort. And I will drop that link in now for you, savvycoach.com. And Mark, I'll throw it back to you for the next lens.
Yeah. So changing the lens in which you see player development. We have all had epiphanies in our life, whether it's been in our personal journey or our coaching journey, where we have once uncovered a blind spot. And once you do that, it will change the game for you. I know for me, going back to adversity quickly, a blind spot that was uncovered for me was messy practices. I had a coach come in and tell me how clean my practice was, but then we talked about the pros and cons of that. He had told me my practice was too clean, and once that changed the lens that I, you saw practice through, I've never looked back. And like Tyler says, we're in this space all the time. So now it's just part of our DNA. So we've all had maybe a house on a street that, like, hey, I've never seen that house before. And then once you see it, you can't unsee it. So we want to change your lens over the next 4 weeks of how you view player development, in particular, and how you can teach players to make reads and decisions. Okay, so Tyler, if you can go 2 slides forward for me, please. So we believe that vision precedes decision. So if we can change your lens in terms of player development, we want you to in turn change the lens in which your players view the game. And the way you do that is you teach them what to see. So like Tyler said, a small change in what you see can change in a big change in what you do. That is the goal for you as a coach to take to your program. So we learned to train players' eyes first, and by telling them what to look for and what to see. And the best way to do that, Tyler, you can go to that next slide, is to tell them what to see and what to do when they pick up on a cue. So we like to teach in if then statements. If you see this, then do this. Uh, Here's something that served coaches really, really well yesterday. We've all been in a situation where we something happens in a practice or a game, and we default to telling players what not to do. Some examples would be: don't take that shot, don't pass to that player, don't dribble to the corner. Um, when you say that, your players actually picture themselves doing what you don't want them to do. Okay. We'll do a quick exercise here so I can show you the impact of this. If I asked you not to picture a red bike, so do not picture a red bike in your head, we're likely all picturing a red bike in our head. And that is the same thing that happens to your players. Don't dribble to the corner, don't let your player go right. They're picturing themselves doing those things. So if I wanted you to picture a green bike instead of a red bike, I should just tell you exactly what to look for. Uh, I know I was this coach that if I said, don't picture a red bike and you pictured a red bike, I would yell at you for not picturing a green bike. So, can we change the lens in which we frame the way we instruct our players? That would be our victory over the next 4 weeks. And Tyler, next slide. Um, that is why we teach in if then statements. We're telling players what to look for. And once we create that language in those teaching points, it becomes pattern recognition for our players, which will generate or create automated responses. So we've all talked about building habits in players to where they know what to do, when to do it, and to be able to do it. We call that pattern recognition. So, next slide here, Tyler. In this rectangle here, I'm going to put words there, and I don't want you to read the words. Okay. So, no exit. You've probably read those without even trying to. You don't have to read every letter. We're just chunking information, right? We don't actually read individual letters. We read the whole word. You could probably read no exit with very, very little effort. That's what we want to unlock for our players. So we're gonna we're gonna kind of shift this approach where we take red bike, green bike, no exit into a basketball framework over the next 4 weeks. And then last slide here for me, Tyler, would be in the context of player development, we will develop these, we'll show you how to develop if then statements and pattern recognition that'll help your players know when to shoot it, drive it, or move it.
Beautiful. All right. Before I move on to identity, and Mark, let's just, I mean, it's so good. Let me go back to this real quick. Victory is different than a win. And it's different than a win because we define the victory, whereas too often and most often, a win is defined for us. It's an external thing. Now, you don't have to spend time and effort focusing on the wins and losses, the score, or the record of your team. You don't need to spend time focusing on that. It's going to be a focus. It is going to be a part of your awareness. That is just basing your game on hope. You hope that if you keep score, you will score better. But if you can actually define the victory and intentionally shift focus to things that will have higher leverage for you, this is big picture victory. That is how a savvy coach can actually improve faster and have a shorter path to their victory. So, for example, in player development, shoot it, drive it, move it, with this pattern recognition, this is a beautiful visual. This open box is how most of your players see the game. When you're complaining about your players having a lack of basketball IQ, or Benjamin, you shared, hey, why do my players seem to have a better feel for the game or understand the game better after they're done playing for me, right? And that frustration. Well, the simple answer is after they're done playing for you, they've had additional years of spending time on pattern recognition, right? The more time you get to recognize patterns, the better and quicker you're at recognizing the patterns. Like that's just why. So what are we trying to do as coaches is we're trying to shorten the amount of time it takes for players to go from seeing this to seeing this. And so our goal, our victory is not can they execute catch footwork? That would be an incomplete goal because it's not attached to the pattern recognition of when they should execute catch footwork. And it's why most coaches continue to have the same pet peeves year after year after year after year, is because they think by working on footwork alone or on technique alone, regardless of what it is, their stop footwork alone or their dribbling technique alone or their finish, they think that by doing that alone without training pattern recognition, they're actually going to get changes in games. And that's a blind spot. And so that's what it means like to define the victory of player development, to have higher IQ players that shoot and drive and move it better, is you must marry pattern recognition, the visual cue, with the technique. And that is what we're going to teach you to do over the next 4 weeks. And when you do that, you will actually develop an identity. And the best way to develop a player that plays 0.5 basketball, that has the identity of they take pride in, I shoot or drive and move within 0.5, is to actually speak to who they're becoming. Oftentimes, we coach who they are. And that's actually one of the worst ways to help a player develop, is by speaking to who they are. You don't shoot it very well yet. You don't make quick enough decisions. You dribble too much. We play off balance at the rim. You're out of control. You don't have good spacing, right? All of those are red bike statements. Red bike statements, regardless of context, keep players where they are. A very interesting thing about the human brain is the human brain can only interpret subject matter, not a positive or negative, right? So that going back to the don't picture a red bike, our brain just has subject matter, red bike. It doesn't process the do or the don't. And so when speaking to a player's identity, I found this over the course of my career to probably be one of the most impactful and powerful tools, is if you speak to who they're becoming and accentuate the one positive, you will get more movement than correcting the mistakes and the negative. Very specific example. There's a player that I've worked with for years now that is an incredibly talented player that had a very poor mistake response, probably the worst attitude and worst mistake response that I've ever encountered. So much so that when I first observed this player play, after getting so frustrated with their teammates, they checked themselves out of the game that I was watching and left the gym before the game was over. They were so frustrated. Like that was the extent of this player's mistake response. Obviously the most talented athlete in the gym, but that was the extent of their mistake response. And so every coach that player had ever had, their parent, teammates, all they could say was, your mistake response is so bad, right? Your attitude is so poor. You're so selfish. Expecting those red bike statements to actually get some movement. And all it did was create an identity for them that they were a bad attitude, selfish, poor mistake response player. When I got a hold of this player for the first time in a training session, their attitude was really poor. Every time they made a mistake or didn't understand, or even someone that was doing the training session with them made a mistake, it was just exasperated body language. Except at the very end of the training session, they made a great pass to a teammate. Their teammate made a shot, and they blew that teammate up. They were excited. They ran up to them one time out of an hour. And after the training session was done, I pulled that player aside. I said, that was unbelievable what you did at the end of that training session. The way that you blew up your teammate and just got excited for them, like your influence is so powerful. You're a leader. And when you have an excited response, it makes you and everyone around you better. That's who you are. Well, it wasn't who they were the majority of the time, and it wasn't who they were the majority of their career, but it was who they were in a moment. And that was speaking to their identity, who they're becoming as opposed to who they are. And if you think about any of you that have ever played competitively any sport or ever held a job where you had a supervisor or a boss, and if you think about the most memorable moment throughout your athletic career or professional career, all of those moments probably came from a time when someone spoke to your identity, either positive or negative, right? Those are the ones that stick with us. And so when you speak to someone's identity, that's when you're going to inspire them to actually become the player that you want them to become. So focus on green bike statements in their identity. And like it's one of the hardest things for us as coaches to do is fully commit to speak to who players are becoming and hold the line. The line is that imaginary line that we all know. We're either above or below the line at all points. Like our teaching or accentuating the positive versus highlighting the negative. We know in a moment, are we above or below the line right now? We know. And it's not hard to know if you're above or below the line as a leader and a coach. It's hard to actually do it. The greatest distance in the world is the distance between knowing and doing. And if you're truly going to speak to someone's identity, you've got to hold the line. The second part of identity that I want to finish up on before I throw it back to Mark is this. In player development, creating a player identity of who they're becoming is actually going to result in the elimination of things. A powerful player identity is not being able to do everything. It's becoming great at what you're good at. Take a look at this graphic here. On the left, we've got a shot chart, both volume and location, of Steph Curry's rookie year when no one knew he was going to be one of the greatest players of all time. I mentioned yesterday there was conversations during his rookie year. Man, who should be our starter here in Golden State? Should it be Steph Curry or Monte Ellis, which seems like a foolhardy statement to make now. It's because Steph was trying to be good at everything. You can see it by the shot distribution, right? And what you see the difference in the development of Steph Curry wasn't him being able to do more, but his development into his identity was him actually doing less. You can see that he focused in on getting great at what he was good at, shooting from distance, getting to and finishing at the rim. Less ISO, less mid range, less other things. And that is the pathway to developing players as well. And that's why we're going to take you through shoot it, drive it, move it. And we're going to narrow the focus on how players can be great at shoot it, drive it, move it, all in 0.5 seconds. And you'll notice that we eliminate things like we eliminate spending time working off of the jab. Because when you eliminate things, you can actually simplify and get better at other things. And so that would be the two ways that I would encourage you to consider how you would coach from a deep place of identity. One, speak to who they're becoming, and two, identify their role by eliminating distraction. Mark, final thoughts before we open up for final questions.
Yeah, I'll just leave with an encouragement to coaches. You had said, we're in this space every day. We're asking you as a coach to grow, and I think there's three stages to growth that we would like you to commit to over the next 4 weeks with us in our cohort. In the first stage, anytime you learn something new, we're going to flex your coaching muscles here. It requires a lot of attention, and hopefully today we've uncovered some blind spots where you can learn some new skills to change that lens for player development. So that first stage is going to demand a lot of attention and a lot of resilience from you as the coach to stay the course. But know that the second stage, you're going to be able to coordinate your knowledge. You're going to be able to start to link some of these teaching points together. It's going to become more and more natural as you become more knowledgeable and comfortable in teaching this way. And then the third stage, which we hope to get you to over time, would be it is just automatic. And like we change that lens once you start to coach this way, our hope is that you never look back. And then you can take your players through those three stages of development and transform the way you coach the game and the way that they play the game.
Really well said. We got one final question, and I think it's a great one. George asks, if you can't get more court time to spend time on this stuff, is there any benefit to classroom time for video analysis, um, reading plays with regards to like their basketball IQ and development? What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, I think there definitely is. We at the Division I level, we had a sports psychologist on staff, and he came to a workshop with us, and he showed imaging of the brain, where when you're actually doing something, uh, your brain fires in a certain way. And then when you picture yourself doing something, it showed how the brain was processing information in a very, very similar way. So I think mental performance is probably a blind spot for a lot of coaches. And I do think there is a ton of value in that. Just like, positive thoughts will lead to positive actions. Same thing with red bike, green bike, right? If we can picture ourselves doing things the right way, we're more inclined to do that when it comes time for action.
Yeah, really good. And I think where many coaches can improve their film sessions is actually take that step to visualization. So it's one thing just to kind of be removed and observing the film, but the connection I think Mark is making is okay. Now let's actually take time picturing ourselves doing it correctly, and that's the part where most coaches only just point out all the errors. It's mostly red bike, and so I think the only addition I would make to that is in order for them to picture themselves doing it right, include film study of players doing it right. Most film study is of mistakes, which is red bike. Now, I think there is some value to mistakes in contrast, but in order for them to picture themselves doing it right, you've got to show the other ones. So I would include film study of higher level players, pulling clips of NBA, WNBA, college teams executing the skill or the spacing or the action how it should be, so they actually have an image of how it should be done. Continually studying yourself making mistakes doesn't necessarily give you solutions.
Yeah. I'll say this: as coaches, we should be teachers first. If we were in a math classroom and we were teaching someone how to solve a problem, we wouldn't give them 10 examples of how not to solve the problem, right? We would actually give them what it looks like, give them the solution. So I would echo that. More of your film session should be what it's supposed to look like. One, so it's framed positively, but you're actually showing them the green bike solution.
Man, I'm going to say green bike a lot more moving forward. We truly appreciate everyone that jumped on live. Everyone's going to be watching this over the next 24 hours. We appreciate you as well. We want to work with you. Head to savvycoach.com if you want to work with us. We'd love to help you over the next month develop players that shoot it, drive it, remove it better, faster. And I'm Tyler. This is Mark. We are Savvy Coaching. And until next time, we'll see you. And we are